Welcome everyone to episode 1 of a new series we're defining as the deleted series. It's not quite the cancelled series, which are completely unfinished movies, but it's all about deleted scenes and the versions of movies you never got to see, ultimately replaced by the final versions. And to start us off, we're going classic Pixar, as they've oftentimes locked things away in their vault over the years, as for some reason or another, major changes were often made to their films from their original incarnations. And in many cases, the original story that was being told was left behind on the chopping block. Absolutely interesting in its own right, but left unfinished and unexplored while a later draft went on to cross the finish line. Even if that later version was the better choice. While we've covered almost all of Pixar's catalogue of entirely unfinished animated movies, we've never taken a look at this scrapped early body of animated work that didn't in fact end up seeing the theatrical release. A masterpiece of a movie that saw significant changes during development and just in time for the release of the third movie in the trilogy. A movie where one character's presence and a changing family dynamic shifted the entire direction of the narrative originally. A movie that, despite having similar themes to the final film, was also pretty different in its early development. And also, there is so much stuff to cover. Today we're looking at the original deleted story of The Incredibles that Pixar left behind. Now, we have quite a bit of information about the original version of Pixar's Incredibles. First and foremost, the DVD release of the movie came equipped with a bounty of scenes cut from the final film, just under a quarter of the final picture's 1 hour and 55 minute runtime. And these scenes can tell us a lot about the original narrative without the context of every other scene. The first of these scenes we'll look at is an entirely different opening from the film's current one. And it's not just some slight variation of the golden age of super sequence that we know and love, it is completely different, starting off with the secret identity of our supers rather than their heroic ones. While the film's final intro begins with the now iconic interviews between Frozone, Elastigirl, and Mr. Incredible, this opening instead opts to start us off by meeting the family on their level at an everyday American barbecue, with Helen and Bob already trying to blend in. Here, the family is just meeting their new neighbors for the first time, and in turn, we get to meet them. We start off with Bob introducing himself to a neighbor, shaking their hand and declaring that,
"I'm super. How you been, Mike?"
The family, Bob and Helen Smith, not Parr, are a young couple who just moved into a typical suburban house, as the couple is introduced to a snarky commodities broker.
Helen, Bob, meet Beth Anderson.
Helen describes herself as a homemaker, and Beth is deeply unamused.
But she can be quite demanding.
The singular child here is Violet, and it's at this point we get to see a phase of the lives of our protagonists that is missing entirely from the final film. Though we're told Helen and Bob have had to move several times, we never actually see what it's like when they're first settling down, or what it would be like for supers that are just settling down. We just skipped 20 years last time. As Helen goes on to explain how important motherhood is to her, she's dismissed by a haughty and disinterested Beth.
But motherhood is really much more than anything.
Meanwhile, Bob jokes around with the neighbors and Dick Schaefer,
I'd like you to meet,
Dick Schaefer.
Hey, Dick.
a prospective new neighbor thinking about buying the house across the street as well.
Hey, everybody on the block has that house.
While the American barbecue portion of this sequence is rather timeless, this opening clearly implies the time period of the film. And that's because, back then, everyday people could afford to buy houses. Bob starts cutting up a steak for the grill, and meanwhile, Beth starts talking smack about Helen's lifestyle.
Throw away my prime years trailing after a bunch of snotty kids?
To which Helen now confronts her with,
"You consider raising a family nothing?"
an interesting conflict and theme to immediately hit onto. Very much reflective of the director Brad Bird's intentions when making this film, as he himself was a new parent at the time, seeing looking after children as a superpower of itself, and having that classic family raising conflict going on. And so, at least in this writing, it reflects in raising into an argument between the two.
Not suited for more substantial things.
So naturally, Helen explodes. I mean, you can't really blame her. It's really interesting. The focus here on Helen's role as a stay-at-home mother is really fascinating. It's an element equivalent of the final film, but it's so downplayed compared to here, where it's spelled out so directly, with Bob being much more focused on the superhero side rather than focusing on Helen on the domestic side. Whereas here, it's just a central part of the intro. Literally the first thing we get to know about her before even any of the superheroics. And it feels very political about it, in a way that the final film is, but isn't. It's just a part of the world of the final film, but here, it's something directly spelled out to the audience. Helen approaches Beth and confronts her about how important her parenting role is.
If more people were just good parents?
Well,
And on top of that, she goes on to explain that she used to have a super important career, but she gave it up to become a parent. Because instead of the law forcing all active supers to go into hiding, it turns out in this version of the world, there's a different reason Bob and Helen are settling down as their secret identities. It's explained later, but what's important right now is that this change of lifestyle is voluntary. They chose not to be superheroes anymore so that they could raise a family. And that change there affects everything in the plot, right? Breaking down the core conflict of this movie of Bob having to deal with not being super anymore by force and pushing against that. Anyway, up next is what I think is the most memorable part of this intro. A cool idea, shame we never saw it, as he accidentally cuts his fingers off. Well, he at least pretends to. Because here is the first reveal that he is in fact a super. Instead of the knife going through his fingers while he's distracted by this argument, the knife instead deforms around his fingers. It's kind of like the breaking plate scene from the final movie. While both scenes show Bob struggling to hide his powers, here it serves as an introduction to the fact that he has powers at all. He splashes ketchup all over his hands to fake an injury because his hands are totally fine. Somebody says to call an ambulance, and Helen says she'd take him herself because they can't wait. To which they get into the car and speed off, only for Bob to reveal his hand is totally fine, and the pair share a laugh with the baby in the back.
Don't even know where the hospital is, do you?
No.
The two of them then go on to chat about how this is going to disrupt their lives. Not moving house, but just...
Couple of months of bandages, scar makeup after that.
It really gets into the specifics of how a cover-up like this would work and how difficult keeping up the lie they live is. That lie being, of course, that they're just everyday people without powers. Whilst at the same time, it is a tell don't show scene. But then we do top it off with this intriguing end to the exchange.
We wanted a normal life.
Did we?
This is a big tease for the reveal of why the pair planned to settle down in the first place. Tonally, while this introduction is very different from the current Incredibles movie, it still focuses on being very personal. And it is a lot clunkier compared to the casual golden age interviews and heroic dramatics that ended up in the film. The opening line isn't cheeky, and the dialogue lacks refinement, with it being early stages anyway. But the superhero by way of secret identity slice of life is a really fun way to start the film. And I think it contrasts very well with where the intro goes next. As Bob and Helen Smith speed off from the party, Dick Schaefer, by the way, what a name, their prospective new neighbor, find the mangled, quickly discarded knife, and he smiles, making a call.
Yeah, what is it? I think I found him.
The next deleted scene from this alternative version, set in the house of the Smith family, is now just... brace yourselves. This is so much more tense with a focus on one particular camera technique, and it is amazing and honestly a shame it wasn't used more. We cut to a fireplace going out and the camera pans up to a family photo of the Smith family. We're shown the quiet inside of their house, floor littered with baby toys, comfortable furniture around, and from here on out, this intro transforms from an unpolished but quirky alternative start to the movie with some interesting changes to the groundwork to being absolutely brilliant. Perhaps even better than the final film's introduction. The camera focuses quietly on establishing the house. It's quiet. There's no sound save for the crackling fireplace and eventually the ticking of a clock. Wordlessly, we start to get attached to the home of our main family. And then... there is a break-in. The tension here is palpable.
Honey,
I heard it.
A burglar?
And yet, Bob and Helen are extremely calm, because they're superheroes in hiding. A standard burglary should mean nothing to them. But to us, an average person, it would be terrifying. And this creates a great contrast.
Oh, and honey, don't hurt him. We're starting fresh.
Bob walks into the other room, the camera following him in one motion as he gets out of bed, his wife giving him other instructions like not to break anything, since she just got the house organized. And this whole thing is shot on a singular, slow-moving camera shot. It's a shame, because in this video, we're gonna have to shuffle and splice it about, so it's not gonna be as impactful. But the whole thing is a long, drawn-out, tense oneer that's incredible and maybe faintly touched on in the final version in a couple of places, but never really to the extent of this, at its most impactful point, right near the start of the movie. And Bob simply responds,
I'm gonna try to enjoy this anyway.
which, geesh, that's super dark. We get glimpses of Bob's darker side in the final film when he's under emotional distress, but this is something he's rather calm about. It's very interesting to see how different the characterization of this Bob is compared to the final movie. The single camera motion continues to follow Bob without a cut, and I really wish we got to see this fully animated. You can bet this one long angle here would have been amazing to see, and would have been totally possible in animation. And despite the nonchalance of the characters, it continues to build that tension as he creeps down the hall. It's all leading to the reveal of our burglar. And when we finally see him, he's dressed in an all-black suit, nabbing whatever valuables he can. And right behind him, we see Mr. Incredible.
The silver? My grandmother gave that to me.
And suddenly the tension is released, but in a way that only leads to a reveal that this situation is even more dangerous than expected. The otherwise calm, collected Mr. Incredible is shot back by an electric pulse, and he is revealed to be unexpectedly vulnerable to what we were led to believe would be just a common thief. It's a masterful subversion, and whoever did this is clearly a grade above the common crook.
What big teeth she has!
Syndrome.
Yes, that's right. The opening of the movie began with Syndrome in full force. There's no buddy backstory, no time to get to know him, just full super villainry.
Don't act surprised, Incredible. I mean, Mr. Smith.
And here, I honestly feel he's more threatening than he ever was in the final film.
You didn't really think that getting a new life would absolve you of the last one, did you? You had to know I'd be back to settle accounts.
In this version of the world, Syndrome is already an established supervillain with a grudge, a clear threat to Bob from his old life, and he's clearly competent. He'd already competently found his way into his adversary's home and, using his technology, outsmarted him.
They don't even know I've escaped yet.
And then he fires his laser. Syndrome's powers are exactly the same as they are in the final film, but this change of environment makes things much more threatening. While, yes, he does invade the home of the Incredibles in the final movie, it's much less vicious there.
Really should remodel. This place would be nice if you opened it up.
Even though Syndrome does trash their house in both versions, the action here is much more brutal. And since we as the audience know very little about the full extent of Bob's powers at this point in the opening, especially because we've not seen him do any hero work yet, he comes across as way more vulnerable as well. It's genuinely such a threatening home invasion scene that works so well. Syndrome really is a standout in vocal performance and also characterization here. I seriously like it better than the final film. I love the intro, and I think the Golden Age works well, but more of this scene would have been fantastic somehow. Like, Syndrome taking a swig of alcohol that he stole from the Smith family? It's just got so much aura, you know?
Hey, don't bother with 911, sweetheart. I've cut the wires.
So Elastigirl gets involved, and while she's initially ignored by Syndrome, she reveals her powers, and then both her and Bob are captured.
No. Elastigirl?
Well, I guess they kept the concept of that line, but they definitely made it better in the final version.
And got busy!
But here, it's used to set up some extra, extremely important context, a little bit of world building that was removed from the final film.
Are breaking the law, Mr. Incredible. You know supers aren't supposed to breed.
Oh, so in this version of the film, Instead of supers all being banned after Mr. Incredible saved someone who didn't want to be saved, they instead wanted to start a family, but the law wouldn't allow them to. Supers aren't allowed to have kids. And this makes so much sense. Honestly, a lot more sense than the final movie. I mean, in the final version of The Incredibles, what stops the supervillains after the supers are banned? With the supers being banned, who would fight the Underminer, for example? There's no way regular police would be able to handle that. But in this version of the continuity, they gave up being supers by choice to raise a family because supers are not allowed to do so. But the villains, well, they're still being handled by other supers. Well, except in Syndrome's case, I guess. Speaking of Syndrome, this scene here is his best in this entire opening. The camera follows his eyes as they trace to the baby in the other room. He walks down the hallway towards baby Violet, carrying her helpless parents with him like balloons. It really takes its time and emphasizes how powerless they are. If this isn't amazing tension building, then nothing really is. And then, just like in the final film, Syndrome is beaten by a baby.
Wait a minute.
Well, that's one way to do it. I love that even here, Syndrome's greatest enemy is his own invention. Anyway, with Syndrome gone, I guess the supers can safely go back to bed now.
Do you smell gas?
Well, this brings us to the end of the film's original opening. And man, what interesting differences there are from the final script. Not only do our protagonists start in a completely different place in their lives, but the situation around their lives is different too. And I can't help but feel like Elastigirl gets a little bit more here to do compared to the opening of the final film. But the most important thing to consider from this early draft is why Bob and Helen retired. It is extremely different and has huge ramifications for the plot. Bob's family explicitly is an exception to the rule, a branch away from the status quo. It's not like all supers were sent away here. They're retiring in a world that is actively full of supers. That is such a huge change. Fundamentally, it changes everything. What an interesting alternate timeline. Hey there, thank you for making it to the halfway mark of this video. Come subscribe if you haven't already for more deleted movies. We're gonna go on the lookout now for more scenes in the cutting room floor. They're not gonna be as extensive as this one usually, but if you have any suggestions, do let us know on our Discord server or in the comments down here, or any format changes you might suggest. It's early days, still a new series, you know how it is. But for now, let's get back to the second half of Pixar's deleted Incredibles 1. But this opening scene is far from the only part of the plot that was extensively altered in this version of the final film, as we've also got to talk about some cut characters. And we'll talk about the most important cut character first, Zarek. Who's Zarek? Well, I'm glad you asked. He was the original main villain of the film. Syndrome is pretty heavily implied to have died in the original opening of the movie. I mean, the house exploded, and he was in it. Though the team liked him enough to later have him take over the role of the main villain, necessitating big changes from the film's opening. He really was just a one-and-done antagonist at first, pretty much just like the Underminer. Zarek, on the other hand, originally was the mastermind of the plot. He was written to be a total Lex Luthor type villain. He served the same role as Syndrome would come to in the final film. But Zarek's design was never fully set in stone before he was cut. And it definitely was the right choice to make Syndrome the film's antagonist.
Everyone, when we did this sequence, responded to Syndrome much more than the villain that had been a part of my original pitch, which was this Zarek character.
Right.
Like Syndrome, he's iconic. But Zarek was nebulous, and the crew couldn't fully settle on his design. Like, look at this! Zarek had so many different iterations in his concept art before being abandoned. And speaking of, look at this insane concept art of him and Mirage. Wild direction Pixar was going with here. And we'll get some more of that when we get to Helen's nightmare later. Similar to Syndrome in the final movie, Zarek was a villain with a big twist. He was Helen's obsessive ex-boyfriend, which definitely would make the family dynamic more complicated, but it's nowhere near as strong as the twist with Syndrome in the final film. Kind of muddies the message a bit too. Zarek would go on to be used in official comic materials, but he was cut from the final film. Still, his inclusion in this original plot would have been super similar to the role Syndrome plays today. Again, makes a ton of sense given that Syndrome blew up. Our next subject is another cut character called Snug. A pretty important character who was almost entirely cut from the final film, save for a very brief on-screen cameo when he's shown in a portrait.
What do you got that's fast?
Let me think.
In the original draft, though, he was a major character with speaking lines and ultimately would die on screen. According to Brad Bird,
Snug was actually in the original pitch, and that if you get caught in their crossfire, there's going to be a price paid.
Snug, I'm calling in a solid, Omi.
About time. What's it been, 15 years?
man, Snug feels like a Gravity Falls character to me, but I just can't place my finger on who.
Starting to get comfortable. What do you need?
Snug is Elastigirl's pilot from the old days.
For those superheroes who can't fly.
Yeah, you got to be taken and dropped and all that stuff.
Originally, he flew Elastigirl's plane, and in order to get the audience to truly care about him before they bumped him off, he has a bunch of dialogue scenes.
All those missions we flew, it's unspoken.
Absolutely.
Fly you to some curiously uncharted island without even wondering why.
And Helen got a lot to say, bouncing off of Snug as well.
Because I'd fly you anywhere, even if you weren't having marriage problems.
Snug!
Having an old confidant of Elastigirl's is a seriously good idea, and I feel like it's a shame he didn't make it into the final film. That said, Elastigirl flying the plane on her own is pretty badass, and it's kind of a give or take in some ways. I wish he just made it in as someone for Elastigirl to work with other than Edna and her family.
It was suggested that you make Helen the pilot. You know, I've thought of that. No, I'm not going to make Helen the pilot because Helen can't die, and somebody's got to die and pay a price.
But ultimately, I think having Helen as the pilot makes a lot of filmmaking sense. And according to Brad Bird, the scene had more impact once Snug was removed.
To be honest, it wasn't as intense when it was Snug.
Right?
Yeah.
Disengage over disengage.
There's something that just hits different when Helen is asking for them to disengage because it's her children aboard.
Abort, abort, women and children aboard.
Say again, there are children aboard this.
No! The way it all came together in the final film is better in my opinion here, but it's interesting to see what could have been. That said, the moment Helen realizes that Snug died does seem like it would have been excellent.
We're not gonna panic, and we're not— Look out!
Maybe a marriage of having Snug and also having Helen be more active as a pilot could have worked, but I guess we'll never know.
What about the pilot?
The most we've really got in the final film is that portrait and this one shot of Helen looking down at the plane, which probably still comes from the storyboarding when Snug was part of the plot and also in that wreckage. After the plane was shot down, we originally get a little more time with each of the family members and their reaction, and we also spend a bit more time in the wreckage as the villains scouted the remains. And with that, we would have seen Syndrome/Zarek's henchmen fly out from outside of Bob's window in ships called Vipers and scout out the crash site.
Debris field all clear. No survivors.
It would have been some connective tissue between the bad guys and Bob with his family. But was it necessary? Not really, no. This scene seems like it was cut fairly late, and even then, it was pretty inconsequential. A lot of the other content that was cut does have a similar purpose, adding context to things we already know.
The idea was that you're showing a guy who is frustrated that he can't do more, and that his instinct is to confront crime.
Like this scene would have had Bob in his car, poorly fitting as always, in a traffic jam. And this scene, just like the next two we'll get to, are from a considerably more adult-focused draft of the film.
Hey, what's your hurry, pal? My little.
Definitely a lot more adult than the typical fare of Pixar, eh? Imagine the Mr. Incredible of today nearly dropping the F-bomb. Then, while stuck in traffic, Bob commits a murder. I mean, stops this speeding biker for the police. But like, that could have killed him, right?
Evening, officers. I found this piece of
Police business, sir. Please return to your vehicle.
Hey.
Mr. Incredible wants to still be a hero, but he's causing problems in society by doing so. In this instance, he's now become the roadblock.
The traffic's moving again, pal! Get back in your car and drive, idiot!
This scene was removed for being redundant, as we'd get other scenes that showed Bob sticking out like a sore thumb more. But given the language, if this scene was actually in the movie, it could have led to a very different Pixar than the one we have today. Speaking of scenes that could have led Pixar to a very different place, we next have Helen's nightmare. This is a scene that, speaks for itself. We see Mr. Incredible in his golden age attire, eyes masked by goggles, lifting a couch full of scantily clad women. Meanwhile, Helen is left in traditional housewife garbs, cleaning up and doing chores while Bob is carried away by the glitz and glamour. Absolutely wild stuff. This sequence was cut for not only being too much, but also too on the nose.
The first pain reliever you reach for, you know,
is the dream.
Well, yeah, the fantasy sequence or the dream sequence.
It was written out of future drafts for lacking the care needed to tackle the darker themes in this movie. In the final film, Helen's worries about Bob having an affair are subtle, and this is very upfront. It makes sense why it needed to go. That said, this very last scene is the opposite. It's a very nuanced, well done, and sad conversation, but it was removed because ultimately, it brought the affair subplot up in such a direct way.
Some people always felt that it could work. Other people felt like, what the heck is this doing in a Pixar movie?
In this scene, Bob is on a high following his return to superhero work.
Hey.
Hey, you.
Too loud?
But Helen is not matching that energy, and for good reason.
What's up, good looking?
Your suit was gone.
This scene would have been the climactic clash between two people on a path to being completely irreconcilable. It's really heavy stuff, and it's made worse by Bob lying.
Your Mr. Incredible suit? When you were on your trip, I vacuumed in here.
I had it cleaned.
While I'm not the biggest fan of liar reveal plots, I have to admit that this conversation is so stressful in such a well-done way.
What, is there a problem?
Oh, yes. There is a problem, Bob.
Bob's lie is hasty and defensive, and it's a great illustration of how not on the same page he and his wife are.
There's a problem on so many levels that you would take out your Mr. Incredible suit when we're supposed to be in...
I said it was for a costume
And
part.
This scene shows us two people who are both afraid of losing something important to them and deeply suspicious of each other. Bob fears losing his return to superwork, and Helen fears losing her husband suspecting an affair. This is in the final film, obviously, but it's so pronounced here. And their fight is so fiery. Bob is clearly in the wrong here, but he can't say anything without destroying the lie he's been telling his family. And so, he gets angry.
Are you telling me I gotta start defending my laundry?
No. The laundry is one of the many services I provide.
But of course, both of them are too afraid to say what they're actually thinking. It's just layers of self-deception.
If you had to have
When
your
did
suit
you
clean,
start loving laundry?
I do the laundry around here.
And then, at the peak of the fight, Helen goes for it.
Did I miss something?
What's this?
Helen holds out a platinum blonde hair belonging to Mirage.
Looks like a hair.
Whose hair?
I don't know. Cleaners?
It's blonde.
It's white.
It's platinum.
And as they bicker about their hair and whether it's platinum blonde or old lady hair, Bob finally has enough. He stands up and tells Helen to stop beating around the bush.
Why don't you ask what you want to ask?
Are you having an affair?
Soul-crushing. And while you'd expect Bob to deflate at that question, he doesn't. He just gets angrier.
Yeah, me and the old lady. One look at her laundry and I had to have her. Are you nuts?
But Helen is crushed. She's so worried, and it's all coming to the surface that she doesn't know what to do. It's all so very human. And Bob, after his outburst, closes the case on the suit and turns away.
I was feeling good about things for a change. I wanted to get the suit cleaned. Can't you just... forget it.
Gosh, this fight just makes me so sad. It's really just a skewering of Bob for his actions. And while it was cut for the final film for maybe going too far, nothing like this is really in the final film. You get Mirage's hair, but it's seen privately, and you do get Bob's moment in the climax where he apologizes, which is fine. One of the best moments in the movie.
I'm not strong enough.
But in the original story, Helen had a chance to confront Bob, and that's just not in the actual movie. Sure, she punches Mirage, and sure, they talk about it as they're leaving, but a moment like this is, again, so tense. And it's missing from the final movie. Add on the fact that the early version of the final version of their argument didn't have Helen stretching taller, and that alone massively changes the dynamic of these two shouting at each other. Altogether, these alternative scenes painted a very different picture of The Incredibles. While the guts of the story were always the same, a lot of these abandoned scenes were darker than their counterparts. The alternate opening painted a much messier version of Bob and Helen's retirement, with a lot of focus on their choice to have a family and its repercussions. Syndrome's role was far smaller, dying in the opening while Violet was still a baby, and before Jack and Dash were ever even born. And having Zarek, an obsessive ex-boyfriend of Elastigirl, in the villain chair puts a lot more pressure on the messy family dynamics. Bob was notably harsher and darker as a character too, and his many flaws often made him hard to root for at times. And yet, despite all this, the core stayed intact. Despite replacing the mundane problems of the opening with the glitz and glamour of the golden age of hero work, despite toning down Bob and dialing back the affair plotline, and despite honing in on being an all-ages superhero film, this movie is still pretty much the same at its core. It's still the fantastic versus the mundane, and still incredibly family-driven and slice of life. But it is fascinating to think about how this movie could have turned out if the studio stuck with that original draft. More than happy to have had the final version that we ended up with, maybe with a couple disappointments some elements didn't fully return. If only the same could be said for Incredibles 2, if there even is an alternative plotline for that one. Overall, I think the movie of this final film is better, and I'm glad it was released as it was. And so that was Pixar's deleted Incredibles 1. For now though, my name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this video. Do tell us your thoughts on both this alternative version and any format suggestions you have or ideas for future deleted episodes. Know any scenes that have been left on the cutting room floor? Let us know, both in the comments here or in our Discord server. I'd love to hear all of your thoughts and more, and I shall see you all in a little bit. Cheerio!